Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Lynn, and in this video I'll be using the Spellbinder's Heartfelt Thanks Vignette die set to create a pull tab slider card. I'm going to take the second largest die in the set. This is the one that cuts out the oval but has the straight edges at the top and bottom. And I'm going to create a folded card. So you can see here that at the very top there we still have our fold, and I'll show you how I did that in a little bit more detail here because I do need to cut an additional insert with a little half-inch glue tab. So my fold, I'm going to be sure to line up below my top cutting line so that it doesn't cut away, and that way we preserve that fold. And this panel that I'm die cutting here is going to be where I actually create my pull tab mechanism, and it's going to get sandwiched in between the folded card that I die cut earlier. And so I'm going to make sure that this insert will actually fit fully into the folded card that I just die cut. So I'm going to kind of do a dry fit so that I can see whether this fits or not. And of course, because we use the same die to cut both of these pieces, it's exactly the same size, so it's not going to fit completely inside. So in order to have it fit, I'm going to actually trim off a little bit from the opposite side of the fold edge. So my folded edge is on the left, and I'm lining it up with a score line to make sure that what I trim off, it's going to be parallel to that fold. And you can see here how once I fit this in, it's just shy of our folded edge. And that's exactly what we want, because if you had that piece of card going right up to the fold or even crossing over that score line, it's never going to fold down nice and flat. And so you just need to trim off a little sliver, and that's enough. So I have this die that I found as part of the April 2019 Large Die of the Month set. It's the For You gift card holder. And I thought this would be the perfect die to cut. Well, at first I was debating whether I wanted to create sort of a ribbon slider, which is why I have the die oriented in this way. But then I decided against that, and instead I'll be making a pull tab slider. So I'm going to use that die to create a track for my pull tab to travel up and down. And so to do that, I'm going to first line up my die cut with my grid mat, and I gave myself a little center line, like a little tick mark in the middle, and I'm using my T-square ruler to make sure that the line I draw is 90 degrees from that top edge. We really want to make sure that this is going completely straight up and down. I'm going to give myself another couple of tick marks here at 1/2 inch from the top and 1/2 inch from the bottom. That's going to be where I start and end my die cut. Now, it's not super important to be precise, so you can adjust this to fit whatever you like, really. And so I have just taken to using 1/2 inch as a standard, and then I can always adjust it from there if I actually need to extend it. And so because this die is not long enough to cut the entire track, I'm going to do a second die cut where the top, I'll line that in up with where we already die cut, so that should fit really snugly. You'll kind of feel it click into place. And then what I like to do is I look through the holes that are in the die, those little holes that let you poke out your die cut, and I just want to make sure that I can see my center line through those holes. That's how I know that I'm lining my die up nice and straight along that line, because once the die is over top of your line, you can't see it anymore, but you can see it through those holes. So that's how I make sure that my die is nice and straight. I'm going to use some liquid adhesive. I like to use Lanco pH neutral liquid adhesive. It's I think technically a bookbinding glue, but it's nice and strong, and it's got low moisture content, so it's very tacky, and it has a very fast grab, and it dries fairly quickly as well. So the two ends of my insert here aren't going to line up exactly with the ends of my folded card, but that's okay. We really want the body, that curved portion, to line up perfectly. And of course, you do want to make sure you burnish whatever adhesive you use to really make sure you have a strong hold. And I'm just making sure that I'm making a little mental note of which side is the front of my card. That way, when I go to attach my pull-up panel, it's facing the right direction. So I just pulled out my 3/4 inch punch, and I'm going to punch myself 4 discs. Those first 2 discs that I just punched were out of 65-pound cardstock, and these next 2 that I'm punching now are from 120-pound. And I like to use the 2 different weights because these first 2 here, the 65-pound weight, are getting folded in half. And it's quite hard to fold 120-pound cardstock, at least a piece this small, in half, but then it also gets really bulky where that fold is. So the 65-pound is really great for that. And once we get those attached, I'm going to, again, burnish this just to make sure that liquid adhesive is nice and evenly spread. And then I'm going to fold up those 2 legs that were not glued down, and just push them through the slot and then fold them back. And once I put glue down and the final 120-pound disc, then we basically lock this mechanism in place, and this disc can now slide up and down the track that we die cut earlier. So that's essentially our pull tab mechanism complete. Now we need to make the insert that actually gets pulled out of the card. So I'm taking the oval die that is in this die set, and I'm going to do a little stamping and coloring. So this is actually a stamp set from the Golden Swan Card Kit of the month, and I don't know exactly what month or year it was from, but it actually has a really lovely set of thank you sentiments as well, and I even considered using that to stamp on this panel too, but I decided I wanted this really nice image instead. So I'm cutting a little mess just out of printer paper, and I just used some repositionable tape runner to tape that down. And that way I can stamp my image, and the portion of the stem that's actually inside the jar, I'm going to do a double stamping. And that way I get sort of a faded impression of that stem. I'm going for this look of the stem sort of looking a little bit different because it's diffused from, the glass jar and the water that's in the jar. I don't know that it was entirely successful, but that's what I was going for. So here I'm pulling out my Albrecht Dürer watercolor pencils. I'm very, very new to using these, and I find them really, really easy to use because you can really control where the color goes down, and you can also control the intensity of the color as well because you can layer up the color, as you'll see in a bit when I start coloring in the rose. And it's so easy to work with these pencils because the color payout is just so fantastic. You can see that right away by just adding a little bit of water, the color just comes to life. And here I'm just using a technique where my brush isn't wet, it's just a little bit damp, and I'm gonna pull color directly off of the watercolor pencil and apply that to my paper. And I am working just on paper, not watercolor paper. Now, I caught myself in time to actually push my die slightly upwards so that I actually leave myself enough room at the top of this to attach my pull tab. I'm really glad that I remembered that in time, because otherwise I would have had to stamp and color that whole thing over again. So here I'm gonna actually die cut the sentiment that actually reads Heartfelt Thanks. So the inner die here will cut out your sentiment, or cut your sentiment into your card, but by combining it with the oval die, that actually cuts out the sentiment entirely, and so you get this really nice frame. And I am die cutting this out of 120-pound paper, so that's why I had to run it through my die cutting machine a couple times, because I probably should have shimmed it considering how intricate and curvy this design is, but I figured I could just as easily use my craft knife to just fully detach those little extra bits, stubborn bits that were still clinging on. So once I've got that die cut, and fully kind of cleaned out, I'm actually going to take the same die that we cut our folded card from, and I'm gonna die cut some of this gorgeous iridescent mirror card, and this is going to be kind of the backing plate behind my sentiment. This die set also comes with these two dies that cut out sort of this kind of filigree pattern that's really nice. And I apologize that I'm working completely off camera, but what I'm doing here is actually doing a partial die cut of the largest die that comes in the set. And I'm just die cutting that top portion because the shape of it exactly matches this little filigree decorative piece here. And you'll see that in a moment. These pieces are actually going to be the pull tab that the card recipient will actually pull on in order to reveal the flower in the jar. So once I get these bits all cleaned up, you'll see how I attach this to my oval piece. This is such a gorgeous pattern, and I love this iridescent mirror card. It's actually one of my favorite types of cards to work with. So I'm just trimming off the little bits that I don't actually need from that white portion, and I'm actually going to also, I did die cut a second white panel and a second red panel. I'm actually not going to use the second red panel. I thought that I might use that on the back, but instead I just kept it white on the back. So I'm going to attach this decorative panel to the front of my pull tab, and that's going to get adhered onto the front of my panel. And then I did just trace out that oval so that I could place this second piece on the back, and the only reason why I'm doing that is just so that the back also has a professional cut edge, and also so that it is completely flush. Then that's totally optional. It doesn't really add too much stability or anything to the card, but I just like doing it because it makes everything look a little bit more finished and a little bit more polished, even though probably you won't even really ever see it. But here I'm just going to kind of preview my mechanism, and I'm using a little bit of painter's tape on our pull tab disc there and just temporarily attaching it to our insert, or this panel that pulls up. And once I see that I like it, I'm just going to put some liquid adhesive on there and attach my panel to it. And definitely always make sure that you're testing your card. I'm going to pause it right here just so that I can describe what I'm doing. I'm marking where the widest part of my pull tab is. That way I can be sure to keep my adhesive below this line, and that will ensure that I have a wide enough opening to actually pull the tab up through my card. And I did make a mistake here where I put glue way beyond where I should have. And what I should have done was push my pull tab all the way down to really make sure that I'm not putting any glue where anything that has to move will be. So if you ever make a mistake like that, don't worry. You can always just wipe away the glue, let it dry, or put some powder over it to really remove any stickiness, and just keep going. So I did pull out my card base, which I did emboss with this really pretty rose pattern. And I thought the rose pattern would be really perfect with this card because it's a little bit of a hint towards the flower in the jar that gets pulled out. And that's really it for this card. I wanted to keep the rest of the card base simple so that when you pull it out, that's where the fun and the extra surprise is. So there you have it, my pull tab slider card using Spellbinder's Heartfelt Thanks Vignette die set. I hope that you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please do consider liking, commenting, and sharing. And if you're so inclined, also please subscribe to my channel. And if you hit the notification bell, then you'll get a notification every time I post a new video to my channel. Thank you again, and until my next video, happy crafting and have a fantastic day. Bye!